Good morning, everybody. I see a bunch of people logging on, so we'll just wait a minute or two and let the everybody get registered here. I see a bunch of people still logging on. We got 55, 54.
I think we can get started, Brad, if you want. It looks like we kind of, still some more people logging in.
Let's go to 902 here. I know that some people might have had to download the Zoom app real quick.
And I don't have a problem extending this call. So if we go over, I'm okay. So I have the time set aside.
All right. Looks like we're getting ready to level off here. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our slips, trips, and falls presentation. You guys are all logging in right now. You're all logging in right now. If you're logged in on a phone, you need to email Laura at the BIA to let her know that you're on in attendance. Or if you have multiple people on one device, sharing a phone or sharing a computer screen, if you guys want to make sure you email her, whoever isn't logged in but watching, so you guys can get your certificates printed. After this presentation, if you want to say you have a new hire or you want a refresher, you can go to the BIASC website and they'll post it on their front row seminars. It'll probably be up in a couple days or so. Tony Villa from Taylor Morrison is going to monitor the chat box. So if you have any questions, you feel free to just type them in on the bottom of the screen. There will be a little icon that says chat. You can just click on that and email any or text, post any questions, and Tony will monitor the chat box.
Brad, it's actually the Q&A box.
Q&A.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Laura. The Q&A box. And with us today, we have Rod Plunkett from Shea Homes, Tony Villa from Taylor Morrison. We have Laura Barber from the BIA, myself, Brad Eskelson from Brookfield Residential. And we have Amy LEUNG, who is going to, geez, sorry guys. Yeah, everybody's phone on silent. So, and we're going to be, Amy LEUNG is going to be from Liberty Mutual. She'll be doing our presentation. I would like to say, earlier this week, I'd like to take a moment of silence. We lost Shea Homes. I know that you guys lost a very valuable team member, Steve Ray, who was a dear friend of mine. So I'd like to spend give 10 seconds of silence just in honor of Steve real quick. All right, thank you. So with that, Steve was a big part of, Shea and safety, and it was a really good deal. Amy, you want to go ahead and get started?
Thanks, Brad. No disrespect to anyone. I am going to shut off my video when I go through the presentation. And again, as Brad mentioned, if you have any questions, please go into the Q&A box and type in your question. Tony's going to moderate that box. If it's a very specific question that he can answer, he'll answer you through the Q&A, or he will go ahead and interject during the presentation if we have enough of the similar question, and we'll go ahead and integrate that into our discussion. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn off my video and share my screen, and we will get started. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the screen. We're going to talk about SLIP's partners, Shea Homes, Brookfield, Taylor Morrison, and especially the BIA of Southern California in facilitating this conversation today. And there will be time for questions as well.
Amy, can we take a pause for a second? I think it's a little jumbled on our end. We may have a
So the objective of this presentation.
Yeah, Amy went into robot mode.
everybody just bear with us for a second. I think we lost Amy momentarily. So Rod, you want to tell us a story?
Okay, I'm back.
Oh,
Am
there
I
she
back? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
much better.
All right. If someone could do the housekeeping, if you can find there's an alternate phone number, I will call that, but hopefully it'll behave itself. Okay. So objectives today, we're going to talk about the cost of slips, trips, and falls. We're going to talk about, common exposures, considerations, and controls. And again, this is meant to facilitate a discussion from everybody that's on the call today. Okay. And let's see if it advances to the next slide. Okay, so most of you can relate to your job site. You have metrics and key
Amy, we're
performance
not seeing, I'm
indicators.
sorry to interrupt. We're not seeing your screen.
Not sharing. Okay, hold on. I think I needed to share again. Happy technical challenge day. Now, can you see my screen?
Got it.
I think when I got kicked out, it turned off. All right, we'll go back to objectives. We're going to talk about the cost of slips, trips, and falls. Our exposures considerations presentation is meant to facilitate this today. Am I still sounding like a robot?
Yes.
Okay. So Rod, you're on mute. Us. Rod.
Can you hear?
And I apologize to everybody because everybody's time is valuable.
You sound good there.
Hold on.
Amy, did we lose you?
I'm going to call in. I'm looking for the phone number. I
You
think
sound
this
good
is going
right
to
there.
be Amy's plan B. So if you guys want to facilitate, okay, I'm going to keep going then.
Yeah, run with it. You sound
Can you
good.
see my screen or do I have to reshare?
We got to
Okay,
reshare
all
your
right, I'm going to
screen.
keep going. Hopefully okay, I will reshare my screen. The internet gods will hopefully be a little bit nicer to me. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so going back to looking at incidents and accidents on a job site. This is something, if you grab enough metrics off your site, you will see that there's a trend here. Falls followed by slips, trips, okay, depending on how you classify incidents at your job site. I'm being told my internet connection's being unstable again. Let's move on. Liberty Index, we gather data, claims data, our 2021 day year, okay, because there's a lag. Leading causes and costs that we spend on, okay. Also being struck or hit by other equipment, but you see a number that's almost, you know, $1 billion between falls to a lower level and falls on the same level. You can see that we're almost over $5 billion in the industry, the construction industry, and let alone the costs that we spend on medical bills for these injuries. Injuries can be life-changing incidences to your workers, right? So going back to a compare and contrast, you look at the injuries and incidences that you may see on your job site compared to Liberty Mutual's experience, lost experience. So
I'm sorry to interrupt, Amy. Amy, we have to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Classify them on your own. Sure.
Amy, Amy, we're gonna have to take just a brief pause. Laura, can Rod or myself share the slide deck?
Yeah, you guys have the ability to share. So if you here, let me put I just should have stopped. There we go. That stopped Amy's sharing. So do you want to try to share the screen?
Sure. Tell me how to do that. Share screen. Okay.
So go at the bottom. Do you have the presentation pulled up?
No, Rod, I don't have the presentation.
I do. I have
Okay,
the
so-
presentation pulled up.
Rod, pull up the presentation so you have it up on your computer screen.
I have it on my screen. I just
Okay.
got-
And so then if you go to the bottom with that green button that says share screen, it'll pull up another
I
window.
apologize for the technical difficulties, everyone.
No problem.
It'll pull up another window and you'll be able to see what you have up on your computer. Click on the one that has the actual PowerPoint. There we go. There you go.
Okay. Are we set?
Yep, now expand, let's see, there you go. So you should be able to, there we go. Yep,
Amy, are you good?
Yes, I can see it. Now we have Plan B. And again, thank you everyone for their patience. We have a workaround. Okay, go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. I'm going to just pick up from here because I'm going to assume that you might have only got bits and pieces of what I said before. Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is Liberty Mutual's Workplace Safety Index. We basically gather data, loss data for the construction industry, and this illustrates the claims and losses that we have paid out, or actually the industry, I should say industry. So as you can see, falls to a lower level, and I'll get into more detail as to different types of falls, okay? Oh, it's almost $3.5 billion in costs, okay, in addressing and managing those injuries and incidences. Number 4, it's falls on the same level. Now, the other 3 items, overexertion, you know, it could be heat illness, being struck by, caught in between, other exertions. So this pretty much goes in line with, for those of you who have done OSHA 10 and 30, that focus 4, right? And one of the focus 4 items is slips, trips, and falls. And Brad and Tony and Rod can support me in this, in making this statement. You know, we're focusing on this today because this is something that is of high incidence and high severity on all our job sites combined. Okay, next slide. So as I showed earlier, the graph on the left, and Rod, you can chime in on this. This is a representation of losses for a particular period for Shay, okay? And on the right, this is compare and contrast those types of losses from Liberty Mutual's Workplace Safety Index from 2021. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned before, in the workers' compensation industry, when we are looking at losses and how we standardize or classify losses for falls, there are basically two types of falls. We have falls to a lower level and falls to the same level. So falls to a lower level, as an example, someone falls off of a ladder, a ramp, set of stairs, steps. We're going through open floor wall openings. Okay, so there's a change in elevation between the two levels or surfaces. Fall protection didn't come through, or we slip, trip, or fall off of an edge or an equipment into a lower elevation. Okay, Rod, can you scroll down just slightly? There you go, perfect. Falls at the same level. This also addresses falls where, hey, you start to fall, but you catch yourself. You know, a lot of us have probably experienced that, where you slip or you trip, but you manage to pick yourself up or save yourself before even hitting the ground. That is also considered a fall at the same level. Now, someone might ask, well, why would we consider that a loss source? Well, you know, some people, when they have a fall, even though they didn't strike or contact a surface, they might incur a strain or a sprain to some other part of the body. So those are things that insurance carriers and medical professionals will pick up and indicate on that doctor's first report of injury. Okay, so again, contributing factors, you're walking on a level surface or ground, and maybe, you know, we have a transition between concrete to sand or to mud, or there's just a lot of debris in the way of your walking path, and we have a fall at the same level. Okay, next slide. So these are our frequent flyers that contribute to slips, trips, and falls. And I've already mentioned it a few times already, but number one thing that doesn't require PPE or a special equipment or process is housekeeping, right? Our work sites are perpetually, you know, changing. The environment changes. We have different trade partners walking on and off in site. We have people loading and unloading materials. We have people reporting to work and actually carrying out their tasks. And we have a lot of debris and trash in that process. Okay, so housekeeping is one of those leading contributors. The use of ladders, okay, how we select ladders, how we set up, how we use and maintain them. Scaffolding, okay, how we set up and use them, how we access and conduct egress throughout the job site, or open walls and floor openings that get created and get closed up as we progress through our build, missing railings and steps, our elevation changes, open holes in excavation. We have conditions that are started by work in progress. We have stub ups, rebar, bolts, pipe work that, you know, show up. They're still there until we cut them off or cut them down. We have slippery, uneven ground, power extension cords, our staging of our material piles and how we get around them. And last and foremost, we either have the lack of or the improper use of personal fall arrest systems, or the use or lack thereof fall protection plans. Brad, Tony, or Rod, do you have anything to comment on these frequent flyers?
No.
Okay. That pretty much is a good representation of those challenges that we have on the job site. Okay.
Absolutely.
Next slide, please. So as I keep planting the seed, housekeeping, not only in the construction industry, but even inside your offices and your job site trailers across all different industries, even outside of construction. Housekeeping is one of those critical factors. If you maintain and control and manage housekeeping, you will have a huge effect and ROI in managing and lowering your risks and losses on your job and project. So these are just a vignette of some pictures that we've kind of gathered just to kind of pique your interest. Hey, you know what? We have a lot of different trades doing different things on site, but if we work together between the management team and those that are actually doing the work closest to the task, getting people's feedback and pre-planning, I'm going to plant that seed. You know, you should be able to reduce and manage a lot of those housekeeping exposures. Next slide, please. Okay, we have framing, we have the plumbing team. Next slide. Now, this is a picture that I just wanted to kind of pique everybody's interest in. You know, we have people, you know, doing the work at this particular site, this particular project. And there's some housekeeping issues here. We have sawdust on the ground. We have slip hazards in areas where we need to walk through or pass through to get to where we need to do the work. Okay. Ownership. Okay. And Brad and Rod and Tony can attest to this. Is, you know, it's a partnership. We can't say, hey, you know what, housekeeping is, you know, something that's one person's responsibility. We all have to work together as a team to maintain housekeeping and access and egress on the site. Now, depending on your project and what your business agreements are, sometimes I know that there might be a particular person or a team that runs as a sweep to maintain housekeeping at a job site, and that's fine, you know, if you guys have that resource. Does anybody have any input or comments about this picture that I'm sharing with everyone?
Amy, I can say that, you know, speaking for everybody, all of our trades are responsible to, you know, take their trash to a designated area, kick out their houses daily, and, you know, not leave a mess or a hazard for people to work around. So, but it is a team effort,
Sure.
that's for sure.
Yes. And hopefully there's communication between the trade groups and with the managing contractor, right? Hey, you know what, we're trying to get rid of or manage our debris. You know, we can't get our roll off in here, or, you know, can we pick up or empty the receptacles a little bit more frequently? It's communication and planning, right? Hey, if we're going to do this work, we're going to have a lot more debris. Plan for managing and containing that debris. So that's, again, that's part of your pre-task plan, your AHA, JHA. Okay, next slide, please. Did we lose Rod? Who's running the slide deck? There we go. So here are examples of material that has been delivered to the project on the left. Okay. Some of the challenges we see is sometimes we have limited space to drop off and stage material. And if we do, we should kind of endeavor to have some sort of materials management, because two things, right? Access to your materials, and in the process of accessing your materials, you might create slip, trip, and fall issues, and you also will have damage to your materials that you're using for your build, right? Picture on the right, okay, we have an open hole. Okay, we have a utility box here that's open. We have material strewn all over the place. So now we have slip, trips, and fall hazards, and also a potential for a fall to a lower level or an ankle injury, as an example. Next slide, please. Some more examples of elevation changes. Okay, now I got to make the comment on the left. That's very nice housekeeping. Okay, it can be done. Now the slide on the right, looks like we have some excavation in process. It hasn't been closed up yet. There's an elevation change. So if there's an elevation change, maybe there's an opportunity to delineate and indicate that there's an elevation change. And there's also some wires and some utilities that are sticking up too. Okay, next slide. Picture on the left, efforts were made to make a little step so the drop off that foundation isn't as an extreme. Okay, so that's good. That's a start. Picture on the right, we have some challenges here, right? There's a huge drop off on the right. As a matter of fact, I didn't source this picture, Rod. Is that a drainage or a basin that's in the foreground?
It's a swimming pool.
Okay, I
probably
thought
on a
so.
Model project.
Okay. Yeah, because I see the little steps on the side. So that's the beginnings of a swimming pool. So sometimes you have other trades engaged in installing their spa swimming pool. And so you have a huge drop off. And you know what? It might even be considered as a confined space, depending on how it's laid out. So food for thought. Next slide. Okay, these are those combination pictures. Okay, access egress. Picture on the left, we do have stairs that go up to the higher level. Okay, and we do have hand railing on it, but look at the landing. Okay, at the bottom of the stairs, we have a lot of debris, slips, trips, and falls. Okay, so if we have people carrying materials around this area, they can slip, trip, and fall on all this loose debris. And it looks like here on the right, we do have a washout, but there's a lot of trash and debris. And it also looks like there's a makeshift ramp that goes over the footing of that stair. Rod, do you have anything to add to this picture?
No.
Okay. Same thing on the right. Again, housekeeping, access, and egress. Next slide, please. Okay, on the comment of ramps and elevation, you may or may not be able to see clearly on the picture on the left. Rod, do you want to explain about the task that was at hand in the picture on the left? I'm assuming there's a light can installation by the electrical trade. And would you please care to comment on the setup of this installation?
Yes, this was a setup by the electricians to install the can lights in the stairwells. So we need to make sure that our scaffolding is installed before they do the makeshift platforms there.
Yeah, so we went ahead and stuck a plank between some members, right, joist members, and then they're just literally walking the plank. Now, I'd like to point out, if you look at the picture towards the lower part, temporary hand railing was installed for the stairs, so they made them usable for those that are doing work on the upper level. But this is planning and staging, right? Most of us we're repeating the same build multiple times. This is not a one-off custom home. So something to consider is what we call prevention through design, right? We know the steps of the build for the home, for the building, and we need to integrate as we do our pre-planning what we need, what types of scaffolding we need, what type of access that we have to provide to our trade partners and members to get the work done safely. Have that conversation. Now, to that point, we have trade partners that are showing up to put in scaffolding on your site, right? And this is a conversation with them as well. You can see in these two pictures on the right, they're basically using a plank to set against their truck to offload scaffolding off their truck. Do you think this is a safe way of unloading bulky items off their truck? They can have a slip and fall and get hurt as well. So that's another conversation to have with them. Rod, Brad, Tony, do you have anything to add or comment on those two pictures? You know, your trade partners that are delivering scaffolding to your site.
Well, it's not only scaffolding, it's the trash guys using planks or picks to, you know, wheelbarrow loads up into their truck, into their trash trucks. It's you know, guys mixing up mortar. It's makeshift scaffolding, especially the picture on the right is done by the electricians, by the drywallers, insulators, window setters, all kinds of different trades. It's something we have to continually monitor.
Right, right. And you to your point, Brad, you know, every trade and every person has their challenges of bringing the materials that they need to the job site, right? And how to offload it off a vehicle. And again, our job sites are very fluid. They change over time, but just something to think about. Hey, you know what? Not only do we have the scaffolding company come out and offload their materials, we have our electricians, we have our framers, you know, maybe, you know, everybody has that common challenge of offloading materials. Is it possible that we have a designated landing or pad for them to on and offload the materials? I'm not saying that that's, you know, a solution that's feasible at every job site, but maybe some thought. Then you can lower that risk. We might not be able to eliminate the risk completely, but we might be able to reduce the risk by a factor. Okay, next slide.
Logistics wise, that would be really hard to do on our job sites.
Sure.
The single plank there, they can have a single plank up to 4 feet high.
Mhm.
But the angle that they have here with that plank, they can only go up 2 feet and 10 feet. And you can see that they're up like 5 feet and 10 feet. So the angle that they have the plank is no good.
Right, the rise over run. So looking at maybe, I'm not saying that, hey, we're going to eliminate the use of ramps or, you know, angled landings, but as an example, if there was a way that where they're offloading to the surface, we reduce it by a foot or two, right? We might not be able to go level surface to level surface. You're reducing that risk and exposure by a factor, right? So again, we're not looking, sometimes we can't eliminate the risk, but we can actually reduce the risk by a particular factor. Okay, next slide, please.
Real quick, Amy,
Mhm.
I do know that we have a couple of OSHA inspectors on. I was just checking the list. One in particular I talked to yesterday, but I think there's also a width requirement on that rise to run scaffold plank. I think it should be 20 inches wide.
Yes, yes. So again, sometimes I always tell people, let's look at best practices. There are regulations, but if you can make it safer and easier, why not? Okay. Here we have, and this is a common thing, we looked at some pictures earlier where we can install, if we can't install the permanent hand railing, but we can have a temporary handrail, either the use of those plastic boots where you can reuse the boots and put in railing, or you have another method. You need to put that in there because even though we can say, oh, well, this is a narrow stairwell and, you know, you can catch yourself on the sides, that's not acceptable. Just wanted to remind everybody, you do, if you're going to use stairwells as an active access or egress, you need to have your handrails in. Okay, trip hazards. Okay, some typical pictures you might see on a build, right? We got the foundation in, we got the utilities in, and we have these little items that stick out of the ground, right? Sometimes we can't cut them down to grade. They're going to remain sticking up. So we might look at methods of you know what, we protect them from being tripped upon, or you manage your traffic. Okay, picture on the right again, you know, we're going from light to dark and someone might not appreciate that stub up that's in the shade. So we need to look at methods of managing and warning people about these trip hazards. Next slide, please. More examples, housekeeping opportunity, We have temporary cords and wiring, just managing your egress. Picture on the right, we have mushroom caps to protect from impalement issues. But that being said, that still can be a slip, trip, or fall issue, right? And you may or may not be able to see in this picture very well, Rod. We have some, is it some copper pipe or copper wiring that's in the
And the
foreground?
picture on the right, the side yard block walls are, the footing and first course is installed, and the 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 rebar was struck by the grading tractor and pulled up. So this is a trip and fall and an impalement issue, and
Mhm.
it's something that we need to cut down prior to any of our workers being exposed to it. So the picture on the right, I mean, you can hardly see it, but the rebar is sticking up and mangled from the rough pull there.
Okay. So if we can't cut that down to eliminate the trip hazard, perhaps using delineators and tape so people can clearly see that that is a trip hazard and also an impalement hazard. Next slide, please. Okay, looks like we have a comment from someone a few minutes ago about it's a challenge, right? To work with all the trades that they clean up after themselves and they don't leave that mess, right, for the next trade, right? And that's common courtesy, right? And you hope that people say, hey, you know what, you made your mess, don't leave it for someone else to clean it up. And I get it. It's you know, we're rushing and we're hurrying, and maybe in that process we forget and you leave things behind. So again, pre-planning, having that discussion, hey, you know what, we end the day 15 minutes earlier so you can pick up and clean up after yourself so you don't leave a mess for the next trade that's coming in. That's a continual conversation. Okay, the slide here is, and maybe we can scroll back up just a little bit, Rod. There we go. So we had a picture earlier about pools and spas, right? Again, this is a huge open hole. This is a huge exposure to other trades that might be working close to or near this. Having that conversation, how can we reduce or minimize injuries from this fall risk, right? Do we use delineators? Do we use tape? Is it possible that we can cover the hole? And that really depends on the size, right? And where it's situated on site. But you should still have that conversation during the pre-planning process. Even before you even start the build, right? You're looking at your schedule, okay? Maybe, you know, would it be possible to put the pull in last versus we put that in between certain build processes on the project? Just thoughts to consider. Next slide, please.
This came from one of our trades, that one of our flat work trades that actually had one of their workers that was finishing the concrete. He tripped and he fell into this and was injured. So the question was, how do they, what type of barriers or what can they do to protect their workers from a situation like this? So that's where that came from.
Okay, here comes the next subject that's near and dear to our hearts, right? Ladders. One of those critical tools that all trades use. And again, they're the most commonly used and misused and abused pieces of equipment on a job site. Okay, you got to make sure that we're using and selecting the correct ladder. Okay, we're setting it up properly. Okay, if it's not properly set up, you're probably going to have a bad experience or outcome using that ladder. And then how we actually use the piece of equipment. These three pictures pretty much sum up the challenges of ladder use. I always encourage that, you know, with pre-planning or knowing what you need, right? it's like to do a job. You want to make sure you have the right tools to do the job right. Same thing with ladders. All too often, and I'm sure our Cal OSHA consultants and partners that are on this call, they're probably nodding their heads, right? Hey, you know what? Just grabbing any old ladder and going, hey, that's close enough. Okay, part of the time, maybe you can get away with it. But there's going to be that one time that you didn't use the correct ladder. You're going to have an incident and you're going to have an injury and a really, really bad outcome. Okay. Next slide, please. Some more examples. Okay, the picture on the left. Rod, do you care to share the situation in this picture?
This was a carpenter that was doing some straight edging in the stairwell. And you can see where he has his ladder set up right on the riser right there. So when he's gonna come down, has a potential for a fall there. When I did show up, he was on the yellow portion of that ladder. And I don't know if someone whistled that I was there and when he started coming down. But two opportunities, one to where the ladder was set up and staged, and two, that he was standing on the top two
Top cap.
steps.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So ladder selection. Okay. Ladder setup. Okay. Two things. The picture in the center shows that this ladder has seen better days. Okay. You can see that there's a bent cross rail on the right hand side, and then someone has reinforced or repaired with a wood member to this ladder. So this ladder needs to be taken out of service permanently and replaced. Picture on the right. This is something we can all relate to, right? We need to get up to a higher level. We've used the correct ladder, but are we putting ourselves at risk carrying a load, one load in our hand, and then obviously we have a tool belt with, and I don't know the weight, but you know, we always endeavor to have 3 points of contact. And in this picture, in this point of time, we only have 2 points of contact, right? And should he have a slip at this point, for some reason his foot slips off or his hand slips off of something, this person is going to have a fall and have a really bad injury. Okay, so making sure that material transport is addressed when working on ladders or accessing, egressing ladders. Okay, next slide, please.
Amy?
Yes, yes.
Amy, this is Tony Villa. Hey, I
Yes.
just want to speak up, and it's all of our positions to be risk management for our company. And if we see this kind of stuff on site, I mean, these guys do this stuff every day, and they don't think it's anything wrong, and if there's anything wrong with it. So when we're out there and about, we have to educate these guys and let them know what they're doing wrong and kind of teach them. I mean, otherwise they're going to continue to do it. So it's hazard awareness on our part. If we see a potential hazard, we need to bring it up and teach these guys, because like I said, they might not know any different. They're subcontractors of ours, and their companies are not teaching their guys like they should. But if we start spreading the word and they go out there, they're going to learn something and they'll retain it, hopefully, and be safer in the future.
Absolutely, Tony. And I'm glad you brought that up, right? Until we educate, right? And I sometimes say you have to convince and sell safety to people, and they've been doing it at risk. They've been doing this at risk behavior for quite a long time. And you tell them and you correct them, they're psychologically inclined to say, hey, you told me not to do this, but you know what? I've done this for hundreds of times, so it's fine, right? And we've seen these situations where it's like, hey, you've done it 100 times at risk and it's been fine. You've been doing it for years, and then one day, oh, something happened, right? And as risk managers and supers and leads, yes, we need to, it's our duty to educate and inform them and say, hey, you know what? You might not have experienced a loss, but we see this a lot and we care about you. So please don't do that. And, you know, you might have to share a story, or you might have to say, hey, you know what? This happened last year to somebody else. And this is what happened. And this is the same exact situation. Please make the right choice of not, you know, continuing with at-risk behavior, right? We're not the safety police. You know, sometimes some of the things we do, yes, you know, it's compliance and regulatory, but at the end of the day, yes, it is our job and duty to educate so people make the right decision and the right choice to lower or eliminate the risk to themselves. Great point.
Education will save lives.
Yes. Yes. Next slide, please.
For those that did get a quiz, that is one of the answers on the quiz is the workers are required to be trained prior to coming to our communities, and the trades are required to have documentation of that training that they've received on working on ladders.
Absolutely.
That's a free one.
So the next common item on our job sites is scaffolds and scaffold use. Okay, and again, some pictures to share with you to kind of pique your thoughts and remind you, hey, you know what, scaffolds, it's a great piece of equipment, but if it's not installed correctly and properly, you might as well not even put it up there. Okay, next slide, please. And again, some more pictures showing that, hey, you know what, we're making the effort in the setup and execution of scaffolds. But again, if it's incomplete and it's not properly installed, you're creating a greater hazard. Next slide, please. Any thoughts or comments on scaffolds? And I'm also going to put in another thing is you might be using different pieces or components from different manufacturers. You also need to be sure that that's acceptable according to the manufacturer's design. Okay, it's a great idea. Hey, you know what? We're going to mix and match, but you also need to make sure that you're using it as designed and approved by the manufacturer. Okay. Planking. Okay. There's specific points about the type of planking that you use in scaffolding. You want to make sure it's the proper grade and it can support the weight and the purpose intended for use. Very, very important. Overlap, right? Our regulations have a minimum overlap and the setback from the working surface. Very, very important that those things are kept in mind as you set up scaffolds. I know you partner, a lot of you don't actually put up scaffolding or erect scaffolding yourselves, and you use another contract trade partner to do that, but making sure that you have that conversation. Okay, pre-planning again. Hey, we're putting up this structure, this building, this is what's required, right? Now you can plan as to what types of materials and how your scaffold is going to be set up properly to get the work done. And the staging, right? As you erect it, what work needs to be done, and as you take it down, what do we need to do before we start taking down that scaffold? So we don't come across where, hey, we need to do something else up there at height. Well, we've already taken down the scaffold. Okay, so we're going to do something else now, right? Next slide, please. Okay, goes back into that conversation. Hey, are we using the correct materials or components and the process of setup for that scaffolding system? If we don't, right, and all of us are focused on getting the work done and the job done, we're going to end up using makeshift adaptations to that scaffold setup to get the work done and to get that access. And when we do that, people are taking at-risk positions and taking on at-risk behaviors. Okay, next slide, please. And to Tony, Ron, and Brad's point, right? We have a duty to educate and inform. You see something, you say something, right? We're working with our trade partners, our brothers and sisters on the site to keep them safe, you know, have that conversation. And yes, our project sites are ever changing, but, you know, we got to have that continuous conversation, that mentoring and coaching to educate people about, hey, you know what, this doesn't look right. Why? So they know and understand. And it might not be on your project. It might be you're setting the stage for them to be on when they're on a different project that's other than yours. And they might perpetuate that knowledge and education to other people and contribute to safety to the construction industry. And that's a win-win for everybody, right? Next slide, please. So again, more pictures, just thoughts to consider. Hey, I'm out here. Does this look right? Ask questions, have that conversation. Next slide, please. Okay. This is something you might see pretty much as a common situation. You know, you might be walking your site and you see people doing work at heights using the scaffold that's been installed. It might not be by them, but by another trade partner or an outside contractor, and they're doing modifications to get to the area they need to work on. And as you can see in this example, there's a ladder, an A-frame ladder. I don't know if they're just leaving it there because that's the only place they can set aside to do work, or it's actually being used as a ramp. Okay. But I think we kind of agree that the way it's set and how this person's carrying materials, we're using the step ladder to access an egress between the two levels. I don't know, maybe they think the ladder kind of stabilizes that plank that takes them to the lower level above that garage. Just some thoughts. Okay, next slide, please. So again, we have a concept, how we execute something, and then the end result. Okay, we talk about railing, okay, and that might actually be a question on that quiz if you guys get that quiz, right? We have to have railing and protection from the leading edge. And in this picture, we do, right? But what's on the other side? We have a fall risk and a leading edge to a lower level, okay? We might not hit the ground, which is a lot lower, okay, a greater fall distance, but we still have a fall risk on the inside. Next slide, please. Okay. We have our challenges when we do interior work, right? Sometimes we say, hey, you know what? We can't get scaffolding in there. You know, I beg to differ. It's planning again. So we really don't want to see this, okay? Using an A-frame and using just planking that they might have taken off of a scaffold from the outside and getting that work done. We need to have a planning process on how we access and do this overhead work. Okay. Next slide, please. Conversation on wall openings and leading edge fall risks. Here on the right, you know, we're using a JLG pettibone to get that drywall up to the next level of this building. You see the person there that is receiving the materials. There's a leading edge there. They should be wearing fall restraint, fall protection, okay, PFAS, when they're assisting and offloading this material. And then we have some trades here working on a deck of a roof. We got a leading edge there, okay. Next slide, please.
To help on that, one of the questions on the quiz, the gentleman on the two gentlemen, those are plumbers that are extending their waist. And so all our trades are required to have fall protection at 7.5 feet, except for our roofers and our framers that can go up to 15 feet. And these gentlemen are plumbers and they're on the leading edge. And that's one opportunity we've run into.
And before you move to the next slide, here's an observation thing. What do we see on the right-hand side of the person on the right? The saw, right? So what do you think they're doing? They're measuring, right? And Rod, correct me if I'm wrong. They're about to make a opening, right? To cut an opening, a penetration on that surface for their plumbing work. So wouldn't it behoove them that they do need to, even more so, have fall protection because they're about to create a floor opening, right? On that deck.
The floor openings are only 3 to 4 inches. They're just for pipes that are coming through the floor. It's what they're cutting.
Sure. But, you know, sometimes when we're working on cuttings, even though it's an opening and it could be small, you're positioning yourself and you might go off the edge of that deck, right? That's why we have people wear fall protection. There have been many incidences, especially even like the solar trades. They're doing install of panels on residential roofing, and you have people just stepping off the edge of the roof because they're paying attention to what they're doing and they forget their orientation, their position on that roof, and they go off that leading edge of that roof. So very, very important. Next slide, please. So this is something that sends chills and fear up my spine, is we shouldn't be doing work like this. We have to have a fall protection plan and process in doing this work. Again, this is not a one-off. Even if it was a one-off, you need to rethink and have that conversation about, hey, you know what? You need to do this type of work. How are we going to do it? Okay. Next slide, please. Are some of our partners exempt from risk? As Rod was mentioning, you know what? There's trigger heights, okay, for trades, but you know what? 3 feet, 30 feet, 15 feet, 7.5 feet, a fall from any of those heights can be life-changing. So we need to look at the risk and reduce or mitigate that risk as best as possible. The work we do is not risk-free, but you can endeavor to reduce that risk by a significant factor. Okay. Posing a question, you know, could or should have these fall risks been anticipated before the work was being done? Okay. Unfortunately, these are not staged pictures for some movie or some storyline. These are actual pictures of things on projects and job sites. Okay. So again, shouldn't be seeing these on the project, but we still do. You want to scroll down a little bit, Rod? There we go. So again, anticipate, plan, and manage work at heights exposures. Assess, eliminate, and reduce if possible that potential of injury from fall risk. And again, like to Brad's point, we need to educate people, right? We're not, we can't watch every single person that's on your site, but you hope that they have enough knowledge and information that they do the right thing and they make the right choice to protect themselves and their fellow workers on site. Next slide, please. Okay, we have great equipment. We have lifts, we have man baskets, we have retractable, lanyards, but they're only as good as how you use them, right? So the lift on the left, okay, depending on the equipment you're using and the policies that are on site, fall protection could be required, a harness and an anchor point inside that basket. The reason why I'm saying it this way is your anchor point has to be as designed in the basket. Okay. Rod, do you have any comments issued to the picture on the left?
No, he should have a harness and he should be anchored to that basket, and
And there should be an anchor point. I'm not familiar with all the different models, but most baskets actually have a designated anchor point where you attach your harness to. Okay. On the right, okay, I don't know if you can see it or not, but that yo-yo is anchored by, it looks like 3 nails. Okay. That, I think the last time I checked, is not a approved method by the manufacturer to attach this SRL. Okay. So you might as well not even bother to install. It looks good. Okay. Yeah, we have it up there, but it's not really going to afford the worker protection should they take a fall. Okay. Next slide, please. Some common other items, you know what, you can't share anchor points, okay, or share an SRL unless it's so designated by the manufacturer and as designed, okay, and you should never really attach a lanyard onto an SRL. You're adding additional length, and that's not good practice, and I can guarantee you most of the time when you do that, you probably didn't do your math correctly as far as fall distance and equipment selection. So those are 2 common things that we see that people do a lot. So we've talked about controls, but just to summarize, I can't say it enough, is, look at your pre-planning and your scheduling process on the job. Talk to it, have that conversation with your trade partners, communicate, right? Being accountable, collaborate with everyone that's on site. And again, educate, facilitate the awareness of these risks with everyone on site. Okay. Next slide, please. So we're almost at about time. It looks like there's a question for someone. Guardrails, I think I forgot to mention, and Rod, do you care to mention and reiterate the Cal OSHA regulation as far as the trigger height where we have to install guardrails on open sides and ends?
Yeah, that is at 7.5 feet.
Okay.
That's when we need rails.
So we're going to make this a little bit participatory, okay? And we've seen some comments already as far as communication and expectations for those that are on your site. What are some other challenges that you see at your projects or sites? Comments? I have a quiet group today.
I don't think they can speak, actually.
Okay.
I think they have to type in their questions. But I
Hey,
will
Amy,
say, sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Amy, I did want to bring up that someone did mention when that other slide where you had the lift, the basket attached to the lift, that there should also be a secondary chain.
Yes, and that's a good that's a good eye. So in that particular setup, there's what we call a safety chain, right, to keep it from coming off, because that's actually a JLG left, and that's a man basket attachment that's designed for use with that. And so again, you need to be sure if you're using approved attachments to that equipment that you're following the instructions and directions on how you secure that properly. So it affords that protection. So that's a good point.
Unless you're lifting the inspector up on the roof.
Ha ha.
Done that before.
You know, and I also talk about solutions here, you know, for the discussion, you know, wires, cordless, temp power, spider boxes, wiring, that's contributes to a trip hazard. But I've seen it as progress over time with the technology and things that are coming out from different manufacturers. There are a lot of cordless tools and equipment out there that are lowering the amount of wires, and it will help with cord management. But to that point, just as a public service announcement, when we have cordless tools, right, we have now charging equipment, and you want to make sure that your charging stations and your charging areas are not creating an electrical hazard, either overloads or we have a big mountain of spaghetti in that area. So how we might be working on lowering our slips, trips, and fall hazards by using cordless tools, we don't want to contribute and make a greater hazard in the world of electrical safety, right, by overloading our electrical supplies. I do want to make that comment, right? We have tools and processes of securing ladders now, okay? But we can't forget that, hey, we got to maintain the housekeeping at the base of our ladders so we don't create a slip, trip, and fall hazard in using those ladders. And then I don't know if you see in the picture on the right, okay, we still have to get our materials up to that higher level. So there are ways of using pulleys, you know, and little baskets to get our material up to the higher deck, or, you know, use a lift. But again, sometimes we're in a big hurry. We can't be bothered to using the right process or the tools to get the materials we need to where they need to be. And we take shortcuts. So we end up carrying things. And as a risk control consultant for Liberty Mutual, I have seen those claims where people go, oh, you know what, I forgot a part, or I need this, and they grab it and they take it up that ladder instead of using a lift, and they fall to great height and they get injured really badly. So again, it's just sharing and selling that idea to people to say, hey, we don't want you to get hurt. You know, that's not a good thing, and this is why. So please put some thought in how you are going to set up your job and your task to be done safely. Okay. There's no other comments or questions. Tony?
Not at this time.
Brad?
You know what? I appreciate everything you've done. This is really good information. I'm sure we've all learned a lot. I do want to remind everybody that if you didn't have a chance to register, or if you were on a mobile phone, which a lot of you guys are, in order for us to show that you were here, because I just see a bunch of numbers, please email the BIA and let them know you were on the call so they can print your certificate. Or if you are, Woodside or Brookfield, Shea, or Taylor Morrison, feel free to just email your safety supervisor and they can forward it to the BIA. And again, this recording will be on the BIA Southern California website. If you can email any one of your supervisors to find out if you can't find that link.
Okay. And before we close, I just noticed that there's a couple of comments that were in the chat. And one was someone is posing to the group here some suggestions. Are there any suggestions on tie-offs when we install Terra Cotta?
Do they have access to tie off to the fascia board or to the corbels? Or is it just a foam eave and then terracotta? That would be an issue. They would have to leave the first course off if it's a foam eave. That would be an option.
Okay, so it really is depending on the structure and the setup.
Site specific.
Okay. So, but that's a good conversation, right? Before you even start the build. Hey, how is it set up? What materials are we working on and how we're going to get those anchor points, right? And it could be the staging of the project itself, how you get to that landing. Now, there's another comment that says we frequently see unmarked open trenches upon delivery. Okay, so again, you might not have, your trade might not have created these openings, but when you show up to the job site, your team and your workers have to find a way around these trenches or navigate them to get to where they need to get the work done. And again, that's having that conversation again, right? One more comment. It says something about mushroom caps are illegal. Tony, you made that comment. Do you care to expound upon that?
Well, they're required to be the square caps now. The mushroom caps are not allowed anymore.
Okay.
So in those particular situations, there was square caps on there also.
Okay.
But you
And
made
that's
mushrooms, and I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that.
okay. So I stand corrected. It's the type of covering and that's kind of like calling gelatin jello, right? So there's two types. They're both caps, but they have to be the square type caps.
You're right.
Okay, thank
I
you.
believe, and sometimes I'm happy to at least see some mushroom caps on there versus the square ones, but although they're really, like I said, they shouldn't be there. They should be square, but at least have something on them because there's a lot
Yes.
of clear places where there's nothing.
Yeah. And the point is with also is by them being covered, since they're a particular color, hopefully it's giving people a visual warning, right? Okay.
Hazard.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? I apologize again for the technical audio visual, which gets really distracting, right? When you're trying to do a presentation and no one can hear or see you. And I thank you for your patience. If you have any questions that weren't addressed in this presentation, feel free to reach out to Rod, myself, or if you don't have our contact information, go reach out to Laura at the BIA and she will route your questions and concerns to us. Thank you again for your time today, and I hope this was of value to everyone.
Thank you, Amy, for your support. We appreciate it.